You know, it's kind of hard out here for guys, you know. They so far down, you know, it's almost feeling like you buried. You know what I'm saying? And we just trying to keep them elevated above ground now. This is a real extraordinary time that we ain't never witnessed in our lifetime. A lot of times young men growing up in the city of Chicago, and for that matter across the country, tend to respond to things based off how they feel, and they think about it later. And usually once they think about it, they're thinking about the regrets of their actions. We want these young men to first learn how to reason, how to rationalize their way through their problems before they end up making a decision that can end up costing them. I had a stumble in life, you know, that it was a 20-year stumble, and I was fortunate enough to be able to bounce back. I grew up in Auburn, Gresham, which is on the southwest side of Chicago, in the Foster Park area. My father was very much involved in my life, but at the age of 15, he died of cancer. And, you know, my life kind of took a turn. I lost my focus. I became more gang involved, and I went away to prison for 20 years. I knew that when I got out, what I wanted to do is help young men not make those same mistakes. And then I ended up losing my own son to gun violence. He became the 339th victim that year. That's why I'm so serious about the work I'm doing. Young men that we're gonna be working with, I gotta make sure they don't end up where my son is at right now. I can't do nothing for him, but I can do a lot for these young men. We primarily work with youth who have been identified most at risk of being shot or being a victim of gun violence. So my job is to make sure that these young men are staying focused, utilizing the resources that we have in terms of employment, whether they need legal assistance, you know, any additional support to help them move further along in their lives. The impact I want these young men to have is to realize their value and the value in other people. You know, I just want to live in a safer community, a safer city. So I'm not going to be, you know, willing to just throw in the towel until I see things change, and I'm willing to, you know, go toe to toe, you know, to my death, you know, in this fight.
I was working, and basically if you didn't know me, you didn't know what my background was. You didn't know, you had no idea of what I had went to prison for. And at 16 years old, me and Ben Wilson had a unfortunate confrontation, which resulted in me shooting Ben Wilson and him passing away. Ben Wilson was just 17 years old, but he had, for all intents and purposes, a very bright future ahead of himself. Because he was the #1 basketball player in the country. He had just got that ranking over the summer. And this was the first day going into the first game that they were playing for his senior season. This happened. Year. The day before that, it happened. And you know, it was just two young men who really didn't have, I would say right now, the emotional tools to really resolve a conflict without it becoming tragic. And we continue to see this play out, right, every day. And this, you know, Benji unfortunately passed away 38 years ago. So basically, as a 16-year-old kid, I was charged with first-degree murder. I was charged as an adult. And I was eventually convicted and sentenced to 40 years. And I ended up doing 20 straight years. I came home when I was 36. So like I said, I had done my time. I was able to, you know, successfully find employment. I actually had a career. I was working with an organization who was helping men returning from prison find employment. I was a client when I first came home, and they helped me a lot, and I was doing everything right. And eventually I ended up getting a job with them, and I became a job coach. So I was helping young men find their way of not returning back to prison. And Cootie and Chike, they didn't know how they was gonna get in contact with me. It was almost like divine intervention, like this was supposed to happen. And they was in a conversation with some people in Chicago who, Chicago, as big as it is, it's a small city, right? People are connected in so many ways. So it was a kid whose mother went to school with my cousin. You know how your cousin know they cousin, and somebody, man, we know him. And I get a call from my cousin saying there's some people that want to make this movie. They want you to be involved in it. She really didn't know what it was. I'm questioning her. She like, just shut up and call the people, right? So I called, and Cootie picked up the phone. And he was like, man, I don't know how this happened, but I know it's meant to happen. And he told me about the project. I was apprehensive because of how my story has always been told.
Right.
I never had control over telling my own story. I had the opportunity, just to regress a little bit, I had the opportunity to see Jesse Jackson maybe about a year ago. He was coming out of the gym, and I was coming from out of a Dunkin' Donuts. And I'm like, man, there goes Jesse Jackson. As iconic as he is in our community, I had an issue with Jesse Jackson. Simply because when I was 16 years old, Jesse showed so much support for Benji's family, which is understandably so. And I'm thinking that a person of his status, I think he could have really changed the narrative on how people saw that incident. Because I asked him one thing, and I told him I was disappointed in him. And I told him why. And he said, why? I said, because the person you was, you never once said, let me go ask this young man, why did he do what he did? And I think if he would have did that, I say because I was just as much a part of the community and a loss to the community as Benji was. Maybe not as great, but I was still a 16-year-old kid. So we should want to know why a 16-year-old kid would pull a gun out and shoot somebody. Why would a 16-year-old kid pick up a gun in the first place? Why do we have conditions that exist for a 16-year-old kid to feel like he need a gun? And I think that's the question that I felt Jesse should have asked me. It probably wouldn't have made a difference in the total outcome, but I think it could have changed some people's mind, and we could have started thinking about things a little different in terms of what type of conditions that we find ourselves in for a 16-year-old to be carrying a gun. And guess what? 16-year-olds are still carrying guns. 16-year-olds are still shooting people. And 16-year-olds are still dying from gun violence. So basically, I felt like Cootie and Chike was giving me an opportunity to finally tell my side of the story. Yeah. And they promised me that with all integrity and dignity, that they would not make me look bad in this documentary. And they didn't. But that wasn't about my story. Right. That was the 30 for 30 was truly about Ben Wilson, the tragedy of losing Ben Wilson, how that came about, and they gave me an opportunity just to talk about my side of the story that happened that day.
So I want to get into Until the Lion Speaks, the actual book, because I'm gonna read something at the very beginning of the book. Your dedication. He wrote this book, and I'm going to read the words. He says, to all the young men who have sacrificed their lives in the cycle of ignorance, never having the benefit of living to realize their full potential. This is who this book is for. And I want you to explain, and the first chapter of the book talk about the low end where I'm from. And he talks about growing up with his mom who cared and gave him opportunities of exposure, his father. So if you can just talk about the dedication to the young men that you wrote this book for and to, but then talk about, before we get into the day of your situation, tell them how you grew up here in Chicago.
Well, first, to start off with the first question, the dedication. As I look back on the situation that I found myself in, during that time, and thinking about how I ended up in that situation, and then seeing so many young men like myself, how they ended up in that situation, how we end up gang involved, affiliated, how we end up, having to live off our wits, which is not really fully developed. We out doing what we can, basically in survival mode. And the way we reference how we see things is based off of very ignorant point of view. And I'm not talking about ignorant in the sense of being stupid, just ignorant by not really having a full understanding of things because of what we find ourselves, dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
A lot of us not having real positive role models in our life. Some of us not having fathers who raised us. And basically we find ourselves looking for certain leadership from certain people that haven't had, very much more life experience as we had.
Right.
And basically we live our lives in this cycle of ignorance. We think that certain things are cool. And then also when you consider the fact that you have so many young men being raised by women, you have, what I would tend to say, you have a lot of female tendencies that's governing male energy at an age where you don't have men to help balance out that energy to where this young man can have some type of reference to who he should be.
Right.
A lot of these young men, because of their circumstances, are lost. They don't have no identity crisis. They struggle to really define who they are, and they allow a lot of things outside of themselves to define who they are. Right. And those influences may not be the most positive influences. We find ourselves going to school every day while our mothers is going to work trying to provide and keep a roof over our head. And then we may see some guys on the corner, they got the brand new mics on, and, they count money. And then eventually, that influence pulls us, even more. It has more of a influence over us, and then we kind of lose our way. Maybe school may not be that much important no more. Maybe them guys on the corner, they paying you a little extra money, you know what I'm saying, to do this, to do that, and you find yourself now being able to put on a brand new pair of mics and, so next thing you know, your mama getting a call saying, they arrested you.
Right.
Or she got to come down to school because you ain't been to school in 30 days. And, she trying to figure out what she can do to help get you right. And a lot of times we make a lot of mistakes based off how we see life at that age, right? And I made my mistake at 16 years old, thinking that carrying a gun was something that was gonna protect me, or something that was cool, or it made me, inflated my ego to think that I was more than who I really was. My identity was basically rooted in foolishness and ignorance, right? And how many of us are dying because of that? How many of us are sacrificing years of our lives because of the cycle of ignorance we done found ourselves in? I talk about the frontal lobe of the brain not really fully developing until the age of 25. Right. And that's the area of the brain that is basically what you make your decisions based off of. So we making a lot of decisions, based off an undeveloped mind or undeveloped brain, and the influences that helps to build up more foundations in that ignorance. We don't have people that's really helping to guide us or mentor us, like champs, a father that really have a positive outlook on life and he want to see the best for his son. Then we're going to find ourselves in trouble. We're going to find ourselves dying early. We're going to find ourselves going to jail early in life. And I think what I want to do is try to help these young men they're struggling through that cycle of ignorance to try to make the right decisions until they get to that point to where as they come up out of that ignorance and they're able to make some real solid decisions that's going to benefit their life, so that the decisions that they do make, they won't have to pay consequences. You talked about, some of we talked about some of the situations that's going on, like these young men that's out here carjacking. Right. And we got 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds out here doing this. You catch a felony at 15, 16 years old, you're going to die with that felony. You can live for the next 80 years and you're going to be a convicted felon because you made a decision out of your ignorance. You can't nobody in here say that you're going to be the same person when you were 16, 30 years later, and no one should be judged for something that they did at 16, 30 years later. But that's how society is set up, especially for us.
Right.
So if we can understand that, the things that we do, it's a very small margin for the mistakes that we make.
Very small.
Very small. We don't get slaps on the wrist. We get time taken out of our lives, for our mistakes. And we don't come back from that. So I dedicate that book to those who are dying and not having the opportunity to fully understand what their potential could be, because they don't benefit from it when you die in it.
All right, by show of hands, I want to make audience interaction real quick. We have young men from all different ages, all different schools. Some young men are actually doing really well in 2022 in terms of what they need to be doing with their grades, behavior, and then some young men are still struggling. And I talked to a couple young men this morning and asked what type of problems we having in school, right? And they were behavior problems. And I asked the question, who talks when a teacher's talking? And the teacher have to stop the lesson and say, stop talking while I'm talking, right? And it starts with these small things and they become something bigger. Now we talk about generational curses. Generational curses happen when there's an absence of information that can be transformational. So at 16, and we're gonna get into family dynamics, by that time you had lost your father. Father was dead, mom was still alive. And the day of the incident, you were supposed to be in school. Willie Dixon, are you related to Willie?
No, that's Omar's grandfather.
Omar's grandfather, right? The legend, Omar's. So now, here's the thing. You were skipping school that day.
Yep.
Let's be honest about it. What school were you attending at the time?
Calumet.
Calumet, okay. Anybody heard of Calumet High School? Okay. So he decided to go over to Simeon. Anybody heard of Simeon High School? Okay. So just talk a little bit about the day, what was going on, because I understand you were going for a cousin because of a money situation. Can you explain what happened?
Yeah, so I had a female cousin who went to Simeon, and she came home and said that while she was up at the school store, some guy went in her purse and took some money out of her purse. And when she turned around and asked for her money, he basically put it in the front of his pants and told her if she wanted it to come get it. So of course, she told him she gonna get her money. She came home and she told me and her brother, and we was going up there to get her money. She wasn't gonna be disrespected like that. And that was the whole purpose of me going up to Simeon. I went to school, met up with Omar, and told him what happened, and about 3 of us walked up to Simeon. And by the time we got up there, ran into a guy who pretty much knew everybody in the area, told him what happened. He said, don't worry about it. He gave her $20. So we was just up there hanging out.
So the issue was resolved.
It got resolved. It was resolved.
Okay, and so y'all hanging out, and what happens when y'all hanging out?
So we run into some people that I know, and they went to Simeon, and this one young lady in particular who I know, but actually her sister is married to my cousin. We walked up to the store, the same store that my cousin had got the money taken out of her purse, and she walks in the store. So I'm just standing out there waiting on her, and out of nowhere I get shoved from behind. I'm talking about shoved to the point to where I almost fell into the girl that was standing next to me, and the fence broke our fall. So in my mind, I'm thinking that, okay, whoever did this, I know it was either intentional or it was unintentional because they was getting away from somebody or whatever the case may be. So I'm expecting a response from this person, an excuse, excuse me. I'm expecting an apology. And as I gather myself and turn around, I see the biggest, tallest human being I've ever seen in my life.
And he's 6'8".
6'8". And he got a trench coat on, so he looks bigger. He looks more imposing than he really was. But 6'8" to somebody at the time, I'm 5'6", looks like a giant. And he keeps walking. Yeah, I mean, he may be the biggest person in the world, but I felt offended because he just kept walking. I felt disrespected.
And what did you say in that moment?
I asked him, was he gonna Was he gonna apologize? Was he gonna say excuse me? And basically turn around and in no uncertain terms told me he wasn't offering no excuse, no apology. And basically, that's when things just went wrong.
And like from that time, about how many, pay attention to this, how many seconds was this interaction, would you say?
Oh man, it couldn't have been no more than about a minute, you know.
1 minute.
1 minute.
That's all.
Right. So here's the dynamics that's going on right now.
Let's talk.
You got people standing around. You got people that has witnessed this assault, so to speak, for a lack of a better term, or disrespect. And I know sometimes when we talk about not having a real sense of who we are, our identities sometimes are in the perceptions of others.
Right.
You know, we wondering what other people are thinking about us and how we gonna deal with that. They gonna see me as a punk, you know, I can't let nobody punk me, you know, and that's basically how things unfolded. So when he wasn't offering no excuse, I couldn't back down. I had to stand up for myself. And one word led to another. And I'm realizing that this guy here, he ain't no punk, and he is a giant.
Right.
And I'm finding myself in a situation now that I need to deal with this because it seems like there's no way out now.
Yeah, so let me ask a question. So at the time, we know who he is now.
Right.
But did you know who he was?
I had no idea who Ben Wilson was.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
This was long before social media.
So this 1984.
1984.
1984
Right.
when this happened. Okay. And
1984.
then what happened after that?
So basically, he was with his girlfriend and she was trying to pull him away and he wasn't having it. So basically, I don't want to go into the language that was being used, but it was an aggressive exchange of words being, you know, used between us. So I pretty much figured this was gonna be a fight, and I know I can't beat no 6'8" guy, right? So I got this gun on me, and I'm figuring, well, if he see this gun, he gonna bag down. So I just unzipped my jacket and told him, "Don't walk up on me." And at that point, his girlfriend got hysterical. And it just seemed like it hyped him up even more. And he was like, "What you gonna do, shoot me now?" And he snatched away from her. So basically, I took a step back, pulled the gun out, and I shot him twice.
Did he lunge at you? Okay.
Yes, because she was trying to hold him back, and he was trying to get away from her. So
Got it.
in my mind, I felt like he was pretty much gonna try to take the gun from me. And that's the one thing I didn't want him to do, is take my gun and shoot me.
So you shot him how many times?
Twice.
You shot him twice. And were you in shock? I mean, what was going on in your mind after you shot him? Did you run? What happened after that?
I ran. You know, me and Omar, we ran, you know, and now it's starting to play out in my mind. I'm thinking to myself, you know, in my mind, why did he force me to do that? In my mind, why didn't he stand down, you know? And in my mind, I'm figuring, you know, me asking him for an excuse, at some point, I couldn't even stand down. You know? But see, people don't realize is that, you know, looking back on this, I always wondered what was going on with Ben. Why was he so aggressive that day? And as it turned out, Ben had a son that was barely 2 months old, that his girlfriend at the time wasn't letting him see. Come to find out, the young lady Erica, who I was with, was a young lady who Ben was having, you know, some relations with. Ben had got suspended a week before that for punching the teacher.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And he had just been put out of school because the baseball coach told the principal that he needs to serve out his suspension. Remember, it was the day before the first game
of the senior year
season, and they was letting him come to practice. So Ben was having a bad day. And I think it was a case of misplaced anger when he walked past me and shoved me out his way. So I don't think he had any intentions on bagging down to begin with. And the bad part about that was that the fact that I had this gun on me, it was destined to just be tragic. You know.
And it was a gun that you picked up from underneath the mattress or somewhere you found.
My auntie.
His auntie. So he took it because, again, remember why he was going up there in the first place. cousin had told him, a boy took my money, yada, yada, yada. Come on up and handle business. So he grabbed the gun and went up there for that situation. Then that situation in the midst ended up getting handled by somebody who gave his cousin $20, but he's still skipping school. I want y'all to listen to the process. Did you intend on using the gun?
Absolutely not. I'm going to say this to every young man out here who has ever contemplated about carrying a gun, who has ever picked up a gun, you know, who has fallen in love with guns. What I learned that day is when you pick up guns, you get gun problems. They gonna come your way. You gonna have, like, say for instance, if I didn't have that gun, I probably could have figured out a way to get out of that situation, or just got my ass beat, right? But I still be, you know, I wouldn't probably be a convicted felon, and Benji probably he'd probably be a Hall of Famer right now. And we don't know, right? But due to the fact that I decided to pick up a gun, you know, I think you have a situation that will give you 10 more reasons why you think you need to use that gun. That if you didn't have a gun, you figure out another way of having to resolve that issue without it turning into a deadly situation. So remember this, when you pick up a gun, you will get gun problems, especially if you don't have the type of maturity to understand what comes with that.
Okay, so we're gonna fast forward throughout the day. You guys run. Where did you go?
I went to my cousin's house in Englewood, and he was watching the news. Well, it was breaking news.
It was breaking news, yep.
I don't care what you was watching. They was breaking in with that.
And this is all over. This is Chicago, but this is national. This is all over the world now.
Yeah. I have family members that was in Germany in the military that called home and saw that, you know. But when I went to my cousin's house, you know, we was sitting in the living room, and I'm trying to process this, right? I'm really just in a state of panic, because I'm realizing I just shot somebody, and now I'm seeing who this person is.
Okay, so you find out from the news, like,
absolutely,
#1 player in the nation shot.
Yeah. And I tell my cousin, I'm like, man, I did that. And he like, get out of here. And I'm like, yeah. So I end up calling my mother, right? And I told her what was going on. But I didn't want to go home, so I end up going to her youngest sister's house, which is my auntie. And she don't know what's going on by the time I get home. It's still breaking in. I'm talking about like this all day, every day. Mm-hmm. And then I hear at my auntie's house that they have arrested 2 people, right? And they looking for a third. So now I know I'm wanted. I know they know who I am.
You 16 years old.
Yes, and my anxiety level was just, I've never experienced that type of anxiety in my life. You know, I've seen movies where you had them posters on Western, and they had a person picture, wanted dead or alive. That's how I felt. I didn't think that I was gonna live beyond that day. You know, this was during the John Burge era. I had friends that I know that had been killed by the police, that had been shot by the police. You know, I had a friend of mine in high school who was kicked down a flight of stairs, handcuffed behind his back, and broke his neck and died. Wow. So I didn't think that I was gonna live beyond that day, to be honest. And my mother had called my auntie, my grandmother, and they said Rush Ewing had came to the house. Some of you guys too young to know who Rush Ewing is, but Rush Ewing was a guy who worked for Channel 7 News. And what he would do to ensure the safety of black men who had been, who the police was looking for, he would help escort them into the police station so that they would make it in there alive, right? So he had came by the house, and, you know, they was negotiating with my family about me turning myself in. And somehow the police found out where I was at, and they came to my auntie's house. I heard that knock.
Mm-hmm. That police knock.
Yeah. And they arrested me about 12 o'clock that night.
Yeah, and we see on the documentary, if you watch the documentary, Billy's in handcuffs. Young man had a little more hair on his head. You know, we bald now.
Right, didn't have none of this.
But the reporter said, he asked a question, did you know him?
Yeah, Chuck Gowdy.
Yeah, Chuck Gowdy. Did you know him? And what was going on in your mind? Because you kind of had this walk when you came in.
So, the thing about that is this. I realized at that moment that I had to be accountable for what I had done. It wasn't no need of me holding my head down and hiding. I had to be responsible. I had to take ownership of that, At the time that Chuck Gowdy had asked me that, I literally had just found out maybe 30 minutes before that Benji had died. Because they placed me in a holding cell. It was a TV right there, And I promise you, I had been praying all night for his life.
For him to live.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just because of the situation I had found myself in, but it was the gravity of understanding that I had shot a human being. I'm a human being. I don't want that type of responsibility of, having another human being be dead because of me. Like, I really felt like at one point I'm gonna have to answer to God for this. What is that gonna mean for me, for my soul?
Right.
So it wasn't a posturing, it was more of I just need to be man enough to take responsibility for what I had done.
Okay.
And I couldn't believe, I'm talking about, it was so many camera people, lights, and it was just a bunch of people, and it was like, the whole world was looking at me,
Right.
And it was like I couldn't hide my head. I had to face whatever it was that I was dealing with. At that moment, my whole life had changed. Like, I was no longer a kid.
At 16, so were you tried as an adult? You went through trial.
Yeah.
What happened?
They call it being 702. I got 702.
Right, 702. Yeah, explain that, because they may not know.
If you are, I believe, at least 13 years old before 17, and you are accused of a crime that they can charge you as an adult. Juveniles who kill somebody can be charged as an adult, which means you will not get a adjudication in the juvenile court. You will not be prosecuted and receive whatever type of sentence that is afforded to a juvenile. You will be charged as an adult in the adult court, and you would be sentenced as an adult as sentenced. So basically, it was 41 days before my 17th birthday, which I spent, in the juvenile detention center, but every court date, I was going to Cook County, 26 in California, in front of a adult judge. And not only that, to show you how people can be, they had my picture and my picture in the newspaper. They also published our address in the newspaper. So my family was receiving death threats. They had like 3-4 hefty garbage bags of letters that was mailed to our house, death threats, My mother lost her job because of that, So, yeah, it was just, And then they questioned us. I actually asked for a lawyer, and being so ignorant of the law, they sent in the assistant state's attorney with a already prepared statement.
Right.
I didn't know who assistant state's attorney was, And anybody in this room don't know. Their job is to gather evidence, to present that before a jury, to convict you. Their job is to send you to jail, not to represent you. So everything about how I got adjudicated was totally illegal. But it didn't matter because, unfortunately, we dealing with the loss of a 17-year-old kid, right? And that's just how the system is set up. And then what people don't know is also they didn't care about Benji either. When the ambulance came and got Benji, he was such in a panicked state, he became overly aggressive. They literally handcuffed Benji to a gurney, and they left Benji. They took him to the nearest hospital, which was St. Bernard.
Yep.
They did not have a trauma surgeon on staff. Benji literally bled internally for over 2.5 hours, when they could have just sent him directly to the county hospital and he would have went straight into surgery. Because of his behavior, they treated him they didn't treat him like the #1 basketball player in the nation. They treated him like they treated me. They didn't care about his life. He was literally handcuffed to a gurney and waited 2 hours and 47 minutes before he went into surgery. And literally, he could have lived. He could have lived. His mother had to make the decision.
And she was a nurse, right?
Yes. She was a registered nurse. He had bled so much internally that basically she had to make the decision to pull the plug on Benji. And that's how he died.
Wow. Now, I want to fast forward a little bit, and then we're going to open it up to a couple questions for our viewing audience. But when you got into, and I'm going to kind of speed this up a little bit, you were in Cook County. You talked about the boiler room. I mean, people have no idea, and I heard you say this on a couple different times, and we've talked about this, how you're treated as such an animal inside of these jail systems. And some of us sometimes are thinking like, oh, this is just a small thing that I get myself involved with. Sometimes an accessory like Omar, who you have gone on record to say he had nothing to do with it. What happened to Omar? And then tell us about the boiler room.
Omar was charged as an accessory, and he was eventually convicted and sentenced to 30 years. It's on the record that I stated he had nothing to do with this. But they pretty much manipulated us into signing confessions against ourselves. The boiler room, I had to go back before the boiler room.
Yeah.
When the first day we went to court, it was a bailiff. She was an older lady. And when they brought us in, she said, oh, so these the MF we've been looking for. She said, I hope they give both of y'all the death penalty and they let me pull the switch on y'all. So I kind of really felt like, this was the attitude I was going to be dealing with throughout my whole time for pretty much the rest of my life.
Yeah.
As a 16-year-old, this is the type of energy that I'm receiving from everybody that I encounter. So at my birthday, when I turned 17, the next day I was transferred to the Cook County Jail, Division 6. I actually had 2 uncles that worked in the Cook County Jail. They wasn't at work that day. One of my uncles, he worked the 3rd shift. He wasn't at work. My other uncle was off that day. So I get to the deck. It's a long process. Once I get to the deck, the next morning, early in the morning, I see like 6 or 7 Cook County sheriffs. And I see them come to the interlock. And just something in my instincts is telling me something ain't right. And they called my name over the interlock to report to the interlock. So I write my mother's number down and tell the guy, hey, call my mother right now and tell her to come out here. Because something was telling me this ain't right. So they called me out there, and it's this white racist sergeant. I never forget his name, Sergeant Zurich. He asked me, why am I locked up? What am I here for? The whole world know what I'm here for, right? And I'm taking the advice of my lawyer not to discuss my case with nobody. And I tell him, I say, hey, I'm not discussing that with nobody. And pretty much they just jump on me right there. They just beat me down. I think he got mad because he tried to slap me, and I kind of faded on him, and he missed, right? And fell into the wall. So everybody, just proceeded to just take advantage of the situation, and they jumped on me. And that's what they do in the county jail. They beat your ass in there. I'm dead serious. I'm gonna be that blunt with it. I hope no one ever goes to the county jail because they will beat your ass in there. That's what they do. And this is in 1984, and they had a much more rigid way of dealing with people back then. You didn't criminal justice reform, prisons, right? That had nothing. That had no play back then. And I didn't know no better. I didn't know the politics of the jail. They asked me, they took me to the captain's office and asked me, was I gang affiliated? And I told them I was. I didn't know no better.
Oh, yeah.
I made the mistake, right? And, they had me handcuffed to the chair, and he pulled out a billy club and hit me in my chest. I'm talking about like he was Jackie Robinson. He hit me so hard I couldn't breathe. And he asked the sergeant who was my cellmate to go get him. So he came and he said, young man, what are you? Are you gang affiliated? And he was like, nah, I'm an inmate. He said, well, why didn't you tell this stupid MF what he was? And they beat him up for not telling me. And then he told the sergeant, I don't care what you do with him, get him the F up out of here. Get him up out my office. So I'm thinking that they're gonna take me back to the deck.
Right.
And we walk past the little opening that goes to the deck, and we go to this elevator. They take me in the elevator, and that's not all of them, it's only two of them now. His name is Bostic, Zurich and Bostic. They take me downstairs in the basement of the boiler room in Division 6. So I'm like, okay. I'm thinking that pretty much this the last day I'm gonna be alive. I just turned 17 the day before that. I'm about to die. Because why am I being taken to the boiler room in the basement of Division 6? And I know they kill people in the Cook County Jail. So I'm still handcuffed. We get off the elevator, we walks into this room, and he pulls out a piece of paper and tells me I'm gonna write a letter to my mother telling her I couldn't cope.
So you know what that means, right?
He pulls out some jug that all I see on the label is flammable, right? And then he goes in the back and get a hanger. He say, well, you're gonna write a letter to your mother because you're not leaving up out this boiler room alive. And I was telling him I'm not writing no letter, and they doing what they doing. They beat my ass again, They trying to intimidate me. And I'm saying to myself, just be strong, man, because I'm not gonna let them kill me. I'm not gonna sign my own death certificate, I don't know how this is gonna play out, but I'm not writing no letter, And I don't know how long this lasted. It seemed like it lasted too long. And then eventually the phone rang. It was a phone on the wall. Bostic went out.
This sound like a movie, don't it?
Yeah, hey, this is true life.
And this is what he experienced.
Yeah. So, Bostic, Zurich get on the phone. After Bostic get on the phone, next thing I know, Bostic Zurich like, yeah, motherfucker, this your lucky day, right? So I walked up out the boiler room, because my mother had called my uncle, who had worked at the county jail, and told him what was going on. He called out there and asked them what was happening because the captain turned out to be one of his friends that they had been working in the jail for years together. And the captain didn't know who I was. So the captain called down there, hey, get him up out of there. My uncle came to work and literally knocked out Sergeant Zurich for what he had done. My mother and my grandmother rushed out to the jail. They was demanding to see me. They wouldn't let them see me. Long story short, when they pulled me up out the boiler room, they put me in segregation in the hole. So this like the first day I'm in the county jail, and this is the welcome party.
The first day, and you're how old?
I'm 17.
At that time, he's just turned 17. 17
in one day, and this is my experience. So I'm in the hole, right? About 20, 30 minutes go by. Captain Dunnigan, that's his name. He come to the door. So I jump up. I'm ready to fight. I get to the back. I'm like, because I'm in this situation. I'm in y'all jail, right? I'm not knowing that the guy actually called my mother. Mm-hmm. They came out here. They called my uncle. I'm not aware of none of this, right? I just know y'all just tried to kill me in the basement. And now you hit me in the chest with this billy club, and now y'all coming back for more. If I gotta fight for my life, that's what I'm gonna do. And he like, calm down, young man. His whole attitude is different. Calm down. I just wanna apologize to you, for what happened, and are you okay? And I'm thrilled now. I'm like, I'm not saying nothing, So he like, you don't have to worry about, being treated like this again. I want to apologize. So anyway, long story short, I end up finding out what happened. And they end up transferring me out that division, because that's the division my uncle worked in. But that was my experience the first day I made into Cook County Jail.
Wow. And so I want to fast forward then. Get ready with your questions. We're going to take a couple questions, then we're going to wrap up. But you talk about, and we've seen concerts, and it's becoming popular again. We saw Kanye and Drake came together to free Larry Hoover, but you actually had a chance to meet Larry Hoover, and he talked to you and said some things that I think everybody need to hear. What was that experience meeting Larry Hoover, and what did he say to you?
For me, before I met Larry Hoover, he was like a folklore. He was like somebody that really didn't exist. It was a name that came with a certain level of respect. You know, it was one of those names that, it was like the Wizard of Oz. Like you see up there, that's where he at, but you don't see him.
Right.
And he got all the answers, right?
Right.
But you know, when I got a chance, it was unfortunate that I had to, meet Larry. I think I got to Stateville in 1989. I was 21 years old. No, 1986. I'm sorry. I was 18 years old when I got to Stateville, 1986. And that's when I met Larry Hoover. And he sent for me. And basically he asked me what was I gonna do. Well, basically he told me what I was gonna do. He told me I was gonna go to school. He told me that basically you just focus your time on going to school. Don't get in trouble, and keep your head up. And basically that's the lesson that was the first conversation, the first lesson I got from him.
Because you was affiliated with the Disciples.
GDs.
The GDs.
Right.
And meeting Larry Hoover, I think this mindset that he's pushing guys to do evil and go out and terrorize and do this undercover. But your experience, and you were how old?
I was 18.
He was 18 meeting him, and he sent for you.
Yep.
So he heard about what happened, what you've done. He knew your whole story.
Yep.
And said that I need to talk to this young man. And he told you that, not asking you, what are you going to do? He's telling you what you better do.
Exactly.
And so did you follow his advice?
I did. I ended up getting my GED a year later. I ended up getting an associate's degree. I'm working on my bachelor's degree right now, so yeah. Actually, I started my bachelor's degree in prison, then they end up taking the program. I'm only 26 credits away from getting my bachelor's. I'm right now enrolled in SNHU, an online program, so I should be graduating hopefully at the end of this year. It took me a long time to get back in school, but I know in my heart that education is something that will mitigate any circumstance for us as black people. I don't care if you got a criminal conviction, you can't change your skin color. People would discriminate against that. But if you got education, it's gonna open some doors up for you. And I felt like I couldn't promote that if I wasn't an example of that, so.
And he's doing revolutionary work with Chicago CRED. He worked with Iman, with Green Reentry. He's a manager, and he's talking to so many young men who have involved themselves with the streets. And he's on the ground, like preaching, don't make the mistake that I made. And he has a story to back it up. So at this time, we're going to open up the floor and take a couple of questions. If you have any questions, I just want you to raise your hand and I'll call on you. You can stand, state your name, and then you can ask your questions. At this time, we're going to open up for questions. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, I'm glad you brought that up. The county jail is a little different than the penitentiary because the county jail, they don't put you on the deck with. So me being 17, the oldest person on the deck was 21. So they have I went to a school wing. So you got from 17 to 21-year-olds, but that's a problem because basically you got all these young lions that don't have no sense of direction. So those, you gonna fight on them school wings. You gonna fight. And every time you come off lockdown, you gonna fight. It's a little different being around older men, because they got a little bit more, they have a little bit more wisdom. You know what I'm saying? They trying to help young guys figure their way through this. But you're right, there are predators in prison. There are predators who looking to take advantage of young men. You got a guy that's been locked up 30 years and you coming in, and the worst mistake you can make is trying to act like you something that you're not. You trying to prove to them that you tough, or you trying to be more than who you are. When I made the mistake of coming to prison for what I came to prison for, I made a deal with myself, right? I decided that I was gonna learn lessons from this point on by watching other people's mistakes. People talk about experience is the best teacher, right? I push back on that. Real wisdom is when you can learn from the mistakes of others, because we can't keep putting ourselves in positions that have to pay for those consequences from our own mistakes. Remember, I talked about we live in very small margins. We step outside those margins, we pay heavy consequences. So I couldn't continue to live my life by being stupid, by making mistakes and always paying. So I used to just watch how other people would be. Oh, he's stupid, I'm not gonna be doing that. You know what I'm saying? Oh, dude, a booty bandit. Nah, I'm staying clear from him. I'm serious. You know what I'm saying? You not taking mine, And just what you talked about, these predators. Just preying on young guys.
Men who want to, and let's just be honest, have sex with other men.
Yeah.
And I think, and let me just jump in here real quick because I want to honor everybody's time. Because we can probably have a 4-part series, and we might need to think about doing that. I want to say this because I think this is very important. During All-Star Weekend here in Chicago, I had the privilege to bring some of the champs to both sides of the gun. And we need to get to this part because I think it's a power in this. Benji had already gone on camera and had a sit-down interview with Benji's brothers. And matter of fact, we watched the documentary originally with Mario Coleman. And he's rectified that because there were some rumors or things that were happening around Chicago about how people felt about what Billy had did to Benji, and rightfully so. So can you talk about that conversation and the documentary that's already out, or it's coming out, right? How was it with the brothers?
So first, to clarify who Mario Coleman is.
Yes.
Mario Coleman is in the 30 for 30. He's Ben Wilson's best friend. No one knew I was in the 30 for 30, who was in the 30 for 30, until they actually saw the 30 for 30. And when Mario saw it, he wanted to meet me. Me and Mario ended up becoming friends.
Right.
Because he basically said that when he heard my story, he knew I wasn't lying because he understood who his friend was. He just hated he wasn't there to pull him away at that time. Because he's had to do that so many other times. But the other side of the gun is a documentary that I was a part of, and we had a chance to do it in a public setting. I was able to reconcile with Ben Wilson's 2 youngest brothers after 30 years of Benji dying. Of course, they were still grieving. They were hurt. They had lost their older brother. And I was the subject of the reason why their brother had been killed. And it was a brother by the name of Charles Johnson who had knew them.
Yep.
And he asked them, how did they feel about, having a reconciliation with me? And it took a while. It took like 5 or 6 years for them to come to the table and be willing to sit down. And for me, I had, for all intents and purposes, I had put that part of my life behind me. I had did my time. I had been, out here living my life. And I don't just, people don't understand the work I do. Like, the work I do, if anybody want to talk about, what I did, first and foremost, so I started working for the Safer Foundation with helping men not go to prison. Now, for the last 6 years, I've been working with young men from 18 to 25 who's dying of gun violence, who is high risk of being victims and perpetrators of gun violence. I've lost 9 young men in the last 6 years that I done worked with to gun violence. But I think I done helped to save like 300 young men.
No questions. Come on, y'all, clap it up for that.
And my passion is to not let these young men go away the way I went away or die the way Benji did. And I don't think his brothers really understood the work I did. And we haven't talked about this, but I also lost my son to gun violence.
And he was shot how many times?
16 times.
16 times, his son.
I have another son, a younger son, who was just shot 4 months ago, 3 times, and he survived that. So, Benji was the 669th person to die in 1984. My son was the 339th person to die in 2017. He got killed 2 days after the 4th of July, which was a historic week in Chicago of gun violence in 2017. It was over 100 people shot that week and 20 people killed. And he got killed, mistaken identity. So I fully understand both sides of that situation, what it's like to be a perpetrator and a victim. And they didn't understand but one side. And, it was a tense moment, a few tense moments sitting across the table with those guys, And I had to tell one of the brothers because he felt like because of his grief, he could tell me that I was in a state of denial. And I'm like, I did my time. I'm coming to this table because I feel like it was important for me to tell you guys whatever you needed to hear. But I'm not gonna be disrespected.
Right.
You can't tell me I'm in a state of denial because I lost my own son to gun violence. You lost a brother. You didn't lose no son. And I'm not minimizing your loss, but I lost a son, So I understand fully, this epidemic that we facing. And I'm on the front lines every day working to stop it. I don't know what you're doing in your life to stop people from ending up like your brother, but I know what I'm doing, I think at that moment we had a breakthrough and they were willing to, accept my apology, and I've really established a real positive relationship with Anthony Wilson, Benji's youngest brother. And it's funny because I got a chance to meet his daughter. And he told me, he said, my mother told me before she died to forgive you. And I'm wondering, why is she talking about you on her deathbed? So he introduced me to his daughter as his uncle because he told me, you took my brother away from me, now you have the responsibility of being my brother. So that's the work that I do, and,
Wow. Come on, y'all, give it up one more time. I know we got some questions.